Most of you who watch my channel by now have already figured out that I like Nebraska's chances at winning big entering 2022. I think that a combination of their staff, of motivation and a chip on their shoulder, which part of that is fueled by the new energy on specifically the offensive staff, but even some on the defensive staff, most of who has returned to the program, incoming transfers, returning starters, an easier schedule, even something as little, or seemingly little, but is actually big, as Scott Frost relinquishing his play calling duties. All of these things mixed into a blender, cooked at the right temperature, I think will result in Nebraska going 10-2, 7-2 in conference, and winning the West. Therefore playing in the Big Ten championship game and, in my own opinion, likely reaching a New Year's Six Bowl, if not a higher tier non-New Year's Six Bowl like the Citrus Bowl, for example. I love this team entering 2022. I like Casey Thompson. I like Anthony Grant. I like Kevin Williams on the offensive line, along with a healthy Turner Corcoran. I like Trey Palmer. There's a lot to like on this team. Also, Mark Whipple, Mickey Joseph, ERIK Chinander, plenty of other names regarding Nebraska football. And I've made several videos on this. But this one's different. Because what I haven't talked about is another opinion of mine on Nebraska football. And that opinion is that my opinion on how well Nebraska football can do is actually totally wrong, and Scott Frost once again disappoints. Now, I don't think that's what's going to happen, but there's a very big chance that it does happen. I think Nebraska has the highest range of outcomes in the Big Ten. I have their ceiling at 11-1 in the regular season and have their floor at 4-8. That is a wide range of outcomes, anywhere from a season exactly like last year, if not worse, if you maybe throw in a few blowouts in those 8 losses, all the way up to an 11-1 regular season that probably only has one blemish on the road to Michigan or Iowa or Purdue or something like that. So there's a wide range of outcomes here, and we're going to discuss today, what if Scott Frost doesn't do enough to secure his job? And this is from a subscriber recommendation. I posted a few days ago just asking for some content suggestions, and this was one of them. What if Scott Frost doesn't work, and what could be some good coaching options and replacements for him? So that's what we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to list 4 names, and I'm going to go from what I think would be the worst choice to the best choice. And we're just going to talk about it. So let's get right into it. If you're new to this channel, or if you've been watching already and you've been consuming a lot of my content but haven't made the decision to hit that subscribe button and to join this awesome community, please do that right now. Hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell so you can get notified when I post new Nebraska content, new Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State, Big Ten content in general, or just college football content in general. Sometimes I'll do videos about non-Big Ten teams. I'll probably be doing one about Tennessee in the next week or two because that's another subscriber request. And I do those. So if you have any content ideas, comment them down below. So let's just get right into it. The first head coach option, and again, we're going from worst to best. So if this option makes you think, what is this guy talking about? Just wait until the end, because I think the last 2 options they're good options. The first one is you can hire within. You can get the young, energetic hype man that is ERIK Chinander. He doesn't have any head coaching experience, but he has been a defensive coordinator for 6 seasons. He did well at UCF. He has not done the greatest at Nebraska, at least in theory, but I think he has done a very underrated job at Nebraska, and here's why. I don't have these statistics laid out for you in this image, but ERIK Chinander's defensive unit, I know for a fact, by points per game allowed, has improved every year he's been a DC, regardless of turnover, etc. And this season, he has a whole lot of turnover. Nebraska does not return a lot of starters. on defense, and they actually lose a lot of depth players too. Casey Rogers is an example of a guy who was probably going to be starting this year. He transferred to Oregon to follow his former D-line coach. But ERIK Chinander's defenses are they're well coached. This past season, the offense, even though it was statistically impressive, was in reality very inconsistent. A lot of questionable play calling, poor O-line play. The defense is what kept Nebraska in those games. You held Ohio State to their lowest points scored in a game, along with two other teams, Michigan, who held them to 27, and Oregon, who held them to 28. Nebraska held them to 26. This is the job of ERIK Chinander, whose defense picked off Stroud 2 times, and despite the fact that they weren't the greatest at pass rush last year, they'll be much better at that this year, they got pressure, and a lot of that pressure is what forced the interceptions. His units helped stymie Michigan's run game, Michigan State's run game, and Kenneth Walker. They stymied Cade McNamara and Peyton Thorne's passing capabilities. They held an Oklahoma offense who, even though they weren't the greatest that Lincoln Riley has produced, they still kept him in range. The defense compensated in a certain sense for a lot of the massive special teams and offensive errors that occurred. ERIK Chinander was also an outside linebacker coach for 2 seasons at Oregon, and he was an assistant for 11 seasons, which those included positions at Northern Iowa, the Philadelphia Eagles as an assistant D-line coach, and Ellsworth Community College, which is a community college in Iowa, where ERIK Chinander played as an offensive lineman at the Iowa Hawkeyes. His defense improves yearly. The issue with him is obviously the head coaching experience and the fact that he has not done a stellar job at Nebraska to possibly warrant a head coaching position to hire within. I'm rating this a 5 out of 10 because I like his energy. I've watched him talk and seen him talk in some interviews, some podcasts, and he seems like an energetic guy, a guy that I would like to be around, that players would love to be around, and his defenses improve yearly at a program as dysfunctional as Nebraska. You have to be doing something right and have some complete manageable management skills, recruiting skills. You have to be able to do a lot in order for a defensive unit to improve yearly over a 4-year span, regardless of turnover, at a dysfunctional place that has been Scott Frost's Nebraska. So ERIK Chinander, I think, is a viable option, but he is not the greatest option. The option that I think would be better, though again I'm listing 4 names, this is just the third best, would be Jeff Monken. If you cannot adapt to the new, why not try the past again and bring the triple option back to Nebraska? Jeff Monken has been a head coach in college football for 12 seasons. 4 at Georgia Southern, and 8 at Army. He's now coming on his 9th season at Army. So 12 seasons of head coaching experience, a 96-59 record in college football, 5 10-plus win seasons. 2 of them came at Army. One a 10-3 record in 2017, and in 2018 he had an 11-2 record, finished ranked in the top 20 of the AP and coaches poll, and he brought Oklahoma, a team that went to the playoff and had Kyler Murray, to overtime. The only other loss was to an 8-5 Duke team that played competitive games in every game but 2 games. So his resume, I think, is impressive. He runs the triple option, which quite frankly is running the ball mostly every single play. And he's also been a running backs coach for 13 seasons, special teams coach for 4 seasons, so he knows how to coach 2 positions that Nebraska has struggled mightily in. Once again, under the Scott Frost era, he's been on a college football staff since 1989. It's a big advantage because he has a lot of experience, but it's also a disadvantage in a certain way because he is older. After all, he is age 55. And a lot of coaches retire in that 60 to 7 year period, and I imagine that Nebraska doesn't want someone who just comes there for 5 years and decides that they want to retire. They want someone who's there, like Tom Osborne, to be there probably for a long period of time and build something. So I don't know if Jeff Monken can exactly be there for more than a decade and build something, but if you want to return to the triple option, return to running the ball, having a sense of solid defense and man ball, game management experience, return to the old way of doing things, then Jeff Monken seems like a pretty sensible option. And if not for his age, I would probably rate him an 8 out of 10. He's, again, been in head coaching for over a decade. He's coached at running backs and special teams. The fact that he has led Army and FBS Independent, who don't get a lot of talent. They're a service academy. They're not the dominant powerhouses they were several decades, or more appropriately, nearly a century, half-century ago. What he's done there is impressive. 58-43 record there. In 2020 and in 2021, he had 9 wins, so 2 9-win seasons in a row after a down 5-8 season in 2019. I don't know. Tell me down below what you think. I think that this one, and ERIK CHINANDER, obviously, since they're not the 2 best options, they have their questions around him. And I do confess I got this idea from Steve Dace. He mentioned it in one of his videos. Why not bring Jeff Monken to return to the triple option? But I kind of like it. It would be interesting to see Nebraska kind of form an identity, which they have not for quite some time, around a style of football. And I think if Jeff Monken came to Nebraska from day one, if Scott Frost does fail, there would immediately be an identity at Nebraska if Jeff Monken came. So that's option number 2. Option number 3, Chris KLIEMAN. Chris KLIEMAN, I have not heard anyone mention this. His annual salary is around $3 million at Kansas State. At Kansas State, he has went 20-16, 13-14 in the Big 12. Overall, his head coaching record, which includes obviously his stop at North Dakota State, is 92-29. Now, you may be thinking the Kansas State resume isn't impressive, but Kansas State, before Bill Snyder, and even at parts during the Bill Snyder era, when he took a break and then returned, and toward the end of his tenure, they weren't much of anything to begin with. Kansas State's in Kansas. They're out in the middle of nowhere. They have little to no natural incoming raw talent. And yet, the guy is 2-1 against Lincoln Riley, who is essentially a consensus top 4, top 5 head coach. He's 2-1 against him. And the one loss, which came in 2021, was by 6 points. The guy has also developed Deuce Vaughn. He has raided the transfer portal this year. He's actually gotten 2 players from Nebraska, one of whom is none other than Adrian Martinez, who I think will do well at Kansas State. He's been a head coach for 9 seasons, a DC for 8 seasons, a defensive backs coach for 9 seasons. And again, the 2-1 record versus Lincoln Riley, who is a really good head coach, even though he has had his faults, specifically on defense. Lincoln Riley is a amazing head coach, and Chris KLIEMAN for winning several national titles at the FCS level, specifically 5, having a 69-6 record at North Dakota State, and then beating Lincoln Riley in Oklahoma with very limited talent, one of which, this should impress you because of Scott Frost, some of his struggles, whether he's choking games away like 2019 Colorado, or last year where he couldn't close out a game. And again, just a reminder, I think that Nebraska and Scott Frost will do well next year, but this video is discussing if they don't, who can replace him. In 2020, after losing in demoralizing fashion to Arkansas State, Chris KLIEMAN and Kansas State go on the road to Oklahoma. They are down 21-35 at the end of the third quarter, and they win 17-0 in the fourth quarter. This guy knows how to close games. He knows how to close games against big-time opponents, like Oklahoma. Oklahoma, both years he's beaten them, finished in the top 10. And this season, once again, Oklahoma finished in the top 10 as well at number 10. And he again only lost to him by 6 points. Deuce Vaughn, the offenses that Chris KLIEMAN and the defenses that he has overseen, very competitive team. They rarely get blown off the field, and when they did, part of which was the 2020 season, it was an injury to their quarterback, Skylar Thompson, who was a really good quarterback as well. So this guy can develop players. He is, I would say, in a similar situation, though a slightly better one. Like if we're to look at a Matt Campbell, for example, Chris KLIEMAN could be a pretty similar name to that. He isn't as old as Jeff Monken either. He's age 54, so actually around the same, but still definitely a guy who I think would work very well at Nebraska. He played at Northern Iowa, he coached at Northern Iowa, Western Illinois, Kansas, Missouri State, and the Dakotas, so he's familiar with the, I guess, what I would call Tornado Alley area, very familiar with it, and I think that would bode well for Nebraska along with the development part. I think he would fit very well. Tell me down below if you think the same thing that I think. Because I'm a Michigan fan, I don't exactly know to the greatest extent what would fit at Nebraska, but I think Chris KLIEMAN, knowing the region, being able to develop like the old Nebraska football program was known for. They didn't recruit at the highest level, but they were known to develop walk-ons into something. They would take what is devalued and make it into this new and great thing. Scott Frost was a transfer from Stanford who probably was thought very little of, and he was a great player at Nebraska, for example. Nebraska and Tom Osborne and Bob Devaney were very much known for developing players, not just recruiting, but especially developing. So I would give this a 9 out of 10. Age kind of plays a factor into it, but also the unprovenness and the losing record in the Big 12. Part of that's due to talent and limitations that he has, which is why I think this would be a good fit at Nebraska, who's a bigger school, better recruits that'll come in, more money, more NIL opportunities, etc. And finally, last but far from least, would be Zachary Taylor from the NFL. And you might be thinking that this is impossible. This is far-fetched. But let me tell you this. Zachary William Taylor, before he reached the Super Bowl this season, was paid less than Scott Frost last year. The Bengals are notoriously known for having a cheap owner in Mike Brown. Mike Brown has been criticized before for being cheap and being attached. Like, he didn't fire Marvin Lewis despite some of his failures in the NFL, and just, he was at Cincinnati for over a decade, never won him a playoff game, for example, and he was 0-7 in the playoffs. That's just one example, and he's cheap. So I think that it is possible to buy Zachary Taylor out of the Bengals, and he did get a raise and a contract extension. The raise wasn't specified, so we don't know the amount, but I can't imagine it's anything ultra extravagant. But he's 19-33-1 in the NFL, which again doesn't sound impressive, but you look at what he did this past season, Zachary Taylor, and he went 10-7 in the regular season, finished first in his division, and reached the Super Bowl. And it was phenomenal. The march that they went on, going into Chief territory, Titan territory, and just winning and winning and winning. He has a 3-1 record in the postseason, reaching Super Bowl 56, which was a very close game. Also doing this and scheming that ride with no offensive line. No offensive line. Head coach in the NFL for, that should say 3 seasons, 3 seasons. Offensive coordinator, counting NFL and college, for 2 seasons. Quarterbacks coach for 5 seasons. Assistant for 6 seasons. Mostly NFL experience. Part of the reason I think this is a 10 out of 10 higher, though, is because of Zac Taylor's history with the Nebraska football program. Zac Taylor played at Nebraska all of you Nebraska fans know this. In 2005, he led Nebraska under Bill Callahan, who was a not-so-good head coach, to an 8-4 record, throwing for 2,653 yards, 19 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 115.9 passer rating. And in 2006, he led Nebraska to the Big 12 championship game, so he won the North Division. 9-5 record, threw for 3,197 yards, 26 touchdowns, 8 picks, and a 146.1 passer rating. And those statistics are not the most impressive, but given for the fact that Nebraska, before the Callahan years, was a run, triple option, I formation team that all of a sudden went to the West Coast offense with like no regard for just slowly introducing the concept to the players. Like, we're just going to go all in on a new scheme that goes totally against what Nebraska's built around. So you're just giving you're spoon-feeding your players more adversity than they should be spoon-fed. And Zac Taylor did pretty all right. I mean, a 146 passer rating under Bill Callahan, and just the atrocity that was at Nebraska. He's been in some tough situations. Also, think of this year. You're in the NFL. You're under pressure because before his 10-7 season, at most he had 4 wins. 4 at most. Imagine the pressure you're under, being called the worst head coach. He was also the least paid head coach in the NFL. And he's young, being doubted as, maybe the Bengals thought that they were getting some smart guy, and they got a lemon. But no. 10-7, he owned some of his own mistakes, which I like. That's something that Scott Frost has not always done well at Nebraska. He owned some of his mistakes, like a bad 2-point conversion against a team that cost him a victory, and led his team to 10-7, 3-1 in the postseason. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, beat the Chiefs twice, which is a very impressive feat knowing how good the Chiefs were this past season. I like him. I like Zac Taylor, and I think that this is realistic because, again, Mike Brown being cheap and Zac Taylor having ties to Nebraska. He played quarterback there. Not only played there, he started there for 2 seasons, just like the guy who currently coaches there. If one prodigal son, or maybe that's the wrong term, but if the favorite son, that's the correct term, if one favorite son fails, why can't one that is more forgotten, but who has been through struggle, who knows how to overcome adversity, and who owns responsibility for his mistakes while improving, adapting, carrying a young, energetic voice and mindset into the program, why can't he come in and succeed? Why can't he? Why can't he lead Nebraska forward? Do what his coach Bill Callahan failed to do and install more of a modern offense at Nebraska? Why can't he do it? I think this is a 10 out of 10 hire. If it does happen, again, if Scott Frost doesn't work out this season in 2022, which I think he will. But Zac Taylor, age 39, coaching currently in the NFL with the Bengals, 10-7 record, drafted Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and worked wonders without an offensive line. And funny enough, his OC at the Bengals is Bill Callahan's son, which is, I kind of find is funny. But that's really all this video is just naming those 4 guys. ERIK Chinander, you can hire within. Jeff Monken, return to the old way. You have Chris KLIEMAN, who I think is a proven winner, who can stand up to those top 10 programs, even with much inferior talent, and scheme his way into beating them and playing very competitively with them and even making comebacks against them like he did versus Oklahoma in 2020. Or you have Zachary Taylor, who I think would be pretty similar to the previous Scott Frost experience, except Zachary Taylor being in the NFL, it would probably be, you're almost downgrading in a certain sense, not meaning that is, an insult to Nebraska, But when you're going from UCF to Nebraska, it's a big leap forward. You might not be ready for that. But going from the NFL, where no, you don't have recruiting, but you have contracts, you have, having a general manager is critical. You have free agency. You have stuff that I myself, because I'm so much more invested in college football, know about. You have stuff that I really can't even describe to you how it works that you have to deal with. And Zac Taylor going from that to college, especially a college where he played football, I think that would be a very similar hire to Scott Frost's, but with a lot more merit and a better resume behind it, and a guy especially who is accountable and who shows, I think, accountability, resiliency, and who achieved at a high level. Reaching a Super Bowl, it's hard to win a Super Bowl. Just reaching one in itself, especially without no line and being in year 3, rebuilding something as bad as the Bengals were, who hadn't won a playoff game in several decades, it's impressive. So if Scott Frost doesn't work out in 2022, which again, you know my thoughts on that, but if he doesn't, tell me down below who you think Nebraska should hire as his replacement. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys around. Bye.